On a spring morning in 1933 at Claiborne Farm in Kentucky, a bay colt hit the ground with legs so crooked the stable hands figured he would never see a racetrack. He was the grandson of man o' war and the son of a stallion no jockey could survive. He slept through mornings, ate double rations, and showed nothing that looked like greatness. Within 5 years, 40 million Americans would stop their lives to hear him run. This is the story of how a horse called Seabiscuit, too small and too broken to matter, became the heartbeat of a country that had lost its own. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment, letting us know where you are watching from. This is the full story, not the highlight reel, the human one. America in 1933 was on its knees. 1 in 4 men had no work. Bread lines stretched around city blocks from New York to Los Angeles. Dust storms swallowed the plains. Horse racing was one of the few escapes people could still afford. A radio and a $2 bet could carry you out of your life for 3 minutes. Out against that backdrop, 4 shattered lives were about to collide. But before Seabiscuit ever saw a starting gate, something happened at a racetrack in Massachusetts that nearly ended his story before it started. And there is one race, the one they ran at Pimlico in 1938, that tells you more about this horse than all of his victories combined. We will get there. But first, we go back to the beginning. Hardtack was Man o' War's son, and he inherited the speed, but not the temperament. He was brilliant in the mornings and dangerous in the afternoons. He bit grooms. He threw riders. He was retired early and sent to stud at Claiborne, where he was bred to a modest mare named Swing On. The colt they produced on May 23, 1933, was small. His legs were not straight. He ate more than any other foal in the barn and slept more than any horse the grooms had seen. Nobody wrote his name down with any expectation. He was the grandson of a god and the son of a failure, and he looked like the line was done. He was sold as a yearling to the Wheatley stable and placed under the care of trainer James Fitzsimmons at Belmont Park. Fitzsimmons had dozens of horses, and Seabiscuit was not a priority. In 1935, his first full year of racing, Seabiscuit ran 35 times. He was used as a training partner for better horses. He ran in cheap claiming races, sometimes 2 in the same week. He won 5 and lost many more. He was not treated as a prospect. He was treated as a workhorse who could earn small purses and tire out the real talent in morning drills. But there was something in him that only surfaced when nobody important was watching. In the gray light before dawn, when the backstretch was empty and the fog hung low over the rail, Seabiscuit moved differently. His stride opened. His ears came forward. There was a quickness buried underneath the laziness and a fire behind the calm. 3 people were about to enter his life, and each of them was as broken as he was. Charles Howard was a former bicycle repairman from Colorado who had moved to San Francisco and made a fortune selling Buicks. He was one of the wealthiest men on the West Coast. Then his teenage son was killed in a car accident. His marriage collapsed. Howard started buying racehorses because he needed something to care about and could not find it anywhere else. Tom Smith was a horseman from the high plains of Colorado and Montana. He had spent decades working cattle ranches and breaking wild horses on the open range. He rarely spoke. He could watch a horse walk 20 strides and tell you things about its body that a veterinarian would need an X-ray to find. He was working at a small racetrack in Detroit when Howard hired him as a private trainer in 1934. Red Pollard was a jockey from Edmonton, Canada. His family lost everything in the Depression. When he was 15, his parents left him at a racetrack and did not come back. He slept in barns. He boxed for meal money between races. He was tall for a jockey, too tall by most standards. He had a sharp mouth and a damaged right eye that he hid from every racing official who checked. He had talent that no one with the power to use it had ever noticed. In the late summer of 1936, Tom Smith was standing at the rail at Suffolk Downs in Massachusetts when Seabiscuit was walked past him after a race. The horse was tired, banged up, running in the lowest class on the card. Smith watched him for a long time. Something in the way the horse carried himself caught the old horseman's eye. Not speed, not power. Something deeper. A stubbornness in the way he held his head. Smith told Howard to buy the horse. Howard paid somewhere near $8,000. That year, the best thoroughbreds in the country were selling for 6 figures. Smith put Pollard on Seabiscuit for the first time at a farm outside San Francisco. The jockey did not rush the horse. He let him settle. He let him look around. He let the anger build on its own terms. Then he turned him loose. After that ride, Pollard walked back to the barn and said nothing for a full minute. Smith asked him what he thought. Pollard said the horse was the fastest thing he had ever sat on. But something happened in the winter of 1937 that nobody in Howard's barn saw coming. Seabiscuit started winning. He won at Bay Meadows. He won at Santa Anita. He won at tracks up and down the West Coast and became the biggest name in California racing. But the East Coast establishment did not care. To them, he was a Western horse, beating Western competition. He had not proven anything against the horses that mattered, and the horse that mattered most was War Admiral. War Admiral won the Triple Crown in 1937. He was the son of Man o' War. Seabiscuit was the grandson. They were family, technically, but War Admiral was everything Seabiscuit was not. Tall, elegant, perfectly bred, trained by the finest hands in the sport. He raced in the most prestigious events on the East Coast and won them all. The newspapers set up the contrast and the country took sides. The little horse from the West against the champion of the East. A match race was planned at Suffolk Downs in the fall of 1937. The crowd showed up. Seabiscuit was entered. The anticipation was enormous. Then the race was called off. War Admiral's camp withdrew, citing track conditions. The public was furious. The 2 best horses in the country had been in the same place at the same time, and the race did not happen. That cancellation did not kill the story. It made the story impossible to ignore. The entire country now demanded the race take place. Then disaster hit from a different direction. In early 1938, Red Pollard shattered his leg in a riding accident. Doctors told him he might never ride again. Seabiscuit had lost the only jockey who truly understood him. Howard needed a replacement. He brought in George Wolfe, a gifted rider and one of Pollard's closest friends. From his hospital bed, Pollard told Wolfe everything. When to hold the horse, when to let him see the competition, when to give him his head. He said the horse needs to look his rival in the eye before he runs him down. Remember that. It matters. On the 1st of November, 1938, 40 million Americans stopped whatever they were doing and turned on their radios. Pimlico Racecourse, Baltimore, Maryland, 1 3/16 miles, 2 horses, no field, just Seabiscuit and War Admiral head-to-head with the entire nation listening. The bell rang. War Admiral broke first. He always broke first, but Wolfe, following Pollard's instructions to the letter, sent Seabiscuit straight to the lead. The crowd gasped. Nobody expected this. Seabiscuit had always been a closer, a horse who came from behind. Not today. He took the lead by a length going into the first turn. War Admiral fought back down the backstretch. They ran neck and neck for a quarter mile. The radio announcer's voice cracked. Then Seabiscuit did something that 40,000 people at Pimlico and 40 million people at home would never forget. He turned his head and looked War Admiral in the eye. He waited. He let the champion pull even, and then he accelerated like the race had just started. He pulled away by 4 lengths. The time was 1 minute, 56 3/5 seconds. A new track record. It was not just a race, it was a dismantling. A little crooked horse had stared down royalty and told the whole country that pedigree does not decide who wins. But that should have been the end of the story. What happened next almost was. In early 1939, Seabiscuit ruptured a suspensory ligament in his left front leg. The injury was severe. Veterinarians told Howard the horse would never race again. Howard took him home to his ranch at Ridgewood in Willits, California, and the press wrote obituaries for a career. The nation mourned like it had lost a member of the family. Meanwhile, Red Pollard was still recovering from his own broken body. Both the horse and the jockey were at the ranch now. Both were damaged. Both were healing. Pollard walked Seabiscuit by hand every morning through the hills behind the barn. For nearly a year, they moved slowly through the California grass, 2 broken creatures putting themselves back together in the quiet. In early 1940, both were declared FIET. Howard entered Seabiscuit in the Santa Anita Handicap, the $100,000 race, the richest purse in the West. Pollard would ride. The press called it a fairy tale. The odds makers called it reckless. A horse with a bad leg and a jockey with a bad eye going after the biggest prize in California. March 2, 1940, Santa Anita Park. 78,000 people packed the grandstand. Seabiscuit and Pollard together again for the first time in over 2 years. The gates opened. Seabiscuit settled in the middle of the pack. He did not rush. Pollard held him steady through the backstretch, waiting. At the far turn, Pollard asked. The horse answered. Seabiscuit began passing horses one by one. At the top of the stretch, he reached the front. The crowd was on its feet. The sound hit like a wall. He pulled away. He won by a length and a half. Pollard was weeping before they crossed the wire. Seabiscuit retired after that race. He went home to Ridgewood Ranch and never ran again. He spent 7 years in the California hills, grazing in the pasture, sleeping in the shade of oak trees, living the quiet life that no one ever expected a racehorse to have. He died on May 17, 1947, at the age of 14. His career record stands at 89 starts, 33 wins, 15 seconds, 13 thirds. He earned $437,730 in purse money, a record at the time of his retirement. In 1938, he received more newspaper coverage than Franklin Roosevelt, more than Hitler, more than any human being on earth. A horse was the most famous figure in America because the country saw itself in him. Charles Howard never stopped grieving his son, but Seabiscuit gave him something to pour his heart into during the years when the world offered very little hope. Tom Smith continued training horses for decades, but those who knew him said he never spoke about another horse the way he spoke about Seabiscuit. Red Pollard rode for several more years, but his body was held together by willpower more than bone. He died in 1981. Those who visited him in his later years said he could still describe the stretch run at Santa Anita in 1940 as though it had happened that morning. Seabiscuit's offspring never matched his brilliance. His son, Sea Sovereign, showed flashes but never became a champion. The bloodline faded, but the story did not. There is a man in Willits, California tonight who tends a stretch of land that was once part of Ridgewood Ranch. The barn where Seabiscuit spent his last years is gone, but the fence line is the same, and the oaks still throw shade across the pasture in the late afternoon. There is a woman in Baltimore who volunteers at Pimlico every autumn and walks visitors to the spot near the far turn where, in 1938, a small bay horse looked a Triple Crown winner in the eye and dared him to keep running. There is a child somewhere tonight who has never heard the name Seabiscuit, and when they do, they will understand something about being underestimated that no classroom could ever teach them. A knobby-kneed colt born in Kentucky in the spring of 1933. The one nobody wanted, the one the grooms called lazy. He became the most famous athlete in Depression-era America, and he did it carrying a half-blind jockey on a bad leg with the whole country listening. That is what they remember. That is what Last S. Another story from Hoofbeat Chronicles. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one finds you when it is ready.